This exhibition, the second in our curatorial season, explores some of these slippages between symbol and sigil, picture and word, and the notion of the slippage between asemic and illegible. So this notion of the hidden, unshared, and unsayable interests homeschool deeply.
Asemic art can serve as a sort of common language, albeit an abstract, post-literate one that we can use to understand one another regardless of background or nationality. For all its limping functionality, semantic language all too often divides and asymmetrically empowers, while asemic texts can't help but put people of all literacy levels and identities on equal footing.
Holman renders asemic or illegible writing in a seemingly subtractive process over a sumptuous background of oil pastel on paper with deep red and orange hues. Certain moments and contexts converge near legibility before returning to the warm embrace of the pictorial. The framed series explores, as such, the intimacy of opacity as a gesture of refusal, while still seeking to document this moment. So now I'm going to turn to MODUS, who's in the show. He put the big scrim up with the plastic wall that you can spray paint on with water-based aerosol cans. And we've done this in previous editions of Homeschool Field Days. Shouts out to MoMA PS1 and Reed College for funding these. But this is the first time that it's had a long-form installation. So I'm excited to see what it looks like with this in-depth, long-form.
Durational presence. Rendering this work as an installation rather than a pop-up will allow a greater degree of illegibility, density of marks, spatializing a poetic of the unspeakable made possible only when people share a space. And here we are.
I'd like to turn to Dozie Kanu's work. I have a long quote here from Tiffany Lambert. She writes that Dozie Kanu sets up a deliberate ambiguity between art and design. He subverts the ethos of functionalism associated with the culture of privacy and domesticity, indigenous to the Euro-American built environment. Through a gestural approach to making, Kanu investigates with equal footing, old and new, found and handmade, opulent and cheap, vernacular and modern, as if his sculptures were melting and sliding in time. He uses standard perceptions of the purposes of these objects as a counterpoint in an elaborate vocabulary of interventions. Kanu draws our attention to the limitations of sculpture and activates the imaginary spaces and potentials where his works might exist, toying with our desire to make easy connections only to intentionally obstruct those symbolic readings. The artist galvanizes common objects and transforms them, allowing their typical associations to swirl with new correlations into a liquid materialist account that is in constant flux.
I was talking earlier about the class I took with Tanas Farsi about language as material, and I think that what I really like about Dozie Kanu's work is the way they use the material as language. These things have connotations.
Function as symbol.
Function as symbol, and the ways that taking these objects and transmuting them into sculptures allows for a lot of associative properties to come alive for me, and I hope for you too.
Based in Johannesburg, Nkhensani Mkhari is a multidisciplinary artist and curator who documents and generates cultural processes attuned to new passages of materiality and consciousness. Taking form in a broad practice that includes photography, painting, performance art, sound design, video, and virtual reality, this body of work attends to dissent in the now or longer modes of thinking, such as the generational cultural repercussions of digitality. So Nkhensani has included a video work in this show.
Ha tsamaiswa ka hara dipilara tsena di tshwereng hao mantswe ha ikiana bofofung ba hae o re ho yaneng a mo tshwere ka letsobane le a tshwarwa ho na le dintho tse le tshwarellang ho na le ditsietsi tse le senyetsang nako tseleng tsa modimo ha yena mo tshwereng ka letsoho a mo tsamaisa hlalosa ka hara holo ena o tlo mantswe hae o reng ntlohele o ko ntlohele ke itshetlehe ka pilara ntlohele ke wena bua le satane ya o tsamaisang nako e kgolwenyane hore yo o tlohele
We've got a couple other artists in the show as well. Star Feliz's work is some that I think ties together and like speaks to a lot of these particular concerns, especially like the relationship between the symbol and the sigil, I think. And when I think about like sigils as like deeply meaningful symbols that like cut through to other worlds, like bridge worlds. And I don't know what that has to do with semantics, or what semantics would say about that, but like...
Our brains are weird.
That's true. They sure are. Star Feliz pursues ritual lines of flight toward Earth-based pathways of resistance to colonial violence.
Meaning writing or semantic writing, as well as asemic writing, are both arguably specific forms of a more general kind of magic. So this is just to Victoria's point. Maybe our brains are just weird, but meaning is still a thing that happens, whether or not it activates our brains in the way that it does. It's still a phenomenon in the world. It's a phenomenon that relates to land, to time, to interspecies communication, to generational adaptation to the technology of the earth, etc. And so making a mark on a surface is like admitting to that surface being alive and giving it a costume to perform in. And drawing on Caribbean religious tradition, the work of Star Feliz in the show, Star Feliz acts as a decolonial experimental archaeologist interested in destabilizing the Romantics' legacy of conquest that reverberates within land art. They create a world where the rebellious cartographies of the 17th century Caribbean come alive with small gestures, using the iconography of Dominican voodoo and contemporary aesthetics of countercultural resistance. So the final series of works is the Portland Backyard Art Group. This is an open source collective that anybody who lives in Portland and has works living outside can be a part of. It draws on legacies of yard art, on plein air painting, on plein air art, etc. It's got to do with objects, concepts, and processes that all live outside. And the works in this show were made, modified, or found by my housemates and me. While we lived in a Woolon area house for 3 years, the works embody varying degrees of aesthetic intention. So the making and witnessing processes involved are not always related to the ideas of creating art. They're more just like, maybe at one point they were just things that lived outside for long enough that we looked at them for long enough or had cohabitated with them for long enough that they became like part of our aesthetic habitus or whatever. And of course, this isn't the first like group to do this. Yard art by Southern Black Americans is a deep influence in modern art. So Deborah Solomon and Denise Morell cite Rauschenberg and his experience with Port Arthur, Texas yard art in the 60s as a quote-unquote inspiration, I would just say source, for his 50s and 60s combines or assemblages. However, even this influence, just like the influence of masks in Picasso or something, kind of de-spiritualizes and de-Africanizes the actual functional aesthetics at play here. So it doesn't pay attention to the spiritual, placemaking, gathering, and sounding intents of the work. They get flattened in this context of modernism. And so the Portland Backyard Art Group works in the show explore how to transfer the energy of a shared space into a white cube, as well as the possibility of private language and the deep mystery of relation.